I'm Dr. G. I not only teach courses in special education, but I was one of the founders of the Study Abroad program with Dr. Sherman. And we've been to many countries already, and we are thrilled to go to Croatia. I'm very excited. Croatia is one of the most exciting places to visit right now due to their beautiful beaches and their history, etc. So it's something new for us. And we're excited that we do have interest, and we are hoping for a May 2021 experience.
So until 3 months ago, I was Dean Sherman, and now I'm Dr. Sherman. I teach, I'm going to be teaching methods courses, science, social studies, and the arts in the fall. I'm really excited about that, already working on my syllabus. And I became interested in Croatia because I worked with Dean Village for 10 years, and and he talks a lot about Croatia. So when this opportunity came up, I said, whoa, you know, this will be great. Actually, I looked at just going there on my own this summer, but that obviously didn't work out. So we're excited about the trip, and it was fun to do all of the research and put the PowerPoint together for you. So I look forward to May 2021.
Boris, you want to tell us something about your country before we...
Sure. So I was born and raised in Croatia. I came to the United States when I was 18 for college and sort of stayed for grad school, met my wife, who's an American, and the rest is history. My family is still in Croatia. I'm from the capital, Zagreb. I'm very active in the Croatian community here in the United States. Like I said, we're a very small country of 4 million people, but of insanely proud people. And, you know, I'm here to help answer any questions. I just off the top of my head, you know, most people are not familiar with Croatia. And the reason being is it was part of the former Yugoslavia, which was a federation of 6 different republics that collapsed in the 91 through 95. We had a terrible war happening. And since, you know, 95, Croatia has been a free democratic country. It is one of the safest places that I've ever been at. In fact, as educators, when you're there in May, you'll probably notice in the early morning that like your first graders and second graders walk on their own through the city of Zagreb that has 1 million people to school. And you'll see them with their little backpacks just on their own walking to schools. But some of it is because we have a very different culture. It's a collective culture, so not individualistic like in the United States. So it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that that first grader is safe crossing the street, gets to the school, that nobody touches them. Everybody kind of like watches after them. It's one of the cheapest countries in Europe. So like you can get a really nice dinner at a nice restaurant for $10. Yeah, depending which part of Croatia you're going to. If you're going to like the city of Dubrovnik that was on Game of Thrones, that's the most expensive place, especially within the old city walls. But in all other parts of Croatia, it's very reasonable once you're there. You know, a glass of wine could be like $3 in a restaurant. Coffee is maybe $2 in a restaurant. You may end up paying more for soda than for wine, actually. But what else? Everybody speaks English in Croatia. Everybody. We actually, part of our educational system, you're not considered educated unless you speak at least 2 foreign languages. And some of it is because Croatia is so small that you're within a walking distance to Italy and to Hungary and to Austria, pretty much. That it's just necessary in order to function to be able to speak. Most people in my part of Croatia speak English and German. Most people on the coast speak English and Italian. But almost everybody, you'll see when you're there, it's not a problem getting around because everybody will be able to communicate with you. And the level of English, especially among younger people, is actually pretty good. So any fears that, you know, you may get lost and nobody will be able to understand you, everybody speaks English.
What happens when we do go abroad is that, especially this being our first trip to Croatia, is that it's a learning experience for everyone. Most of you have not been abroad or have not been abroad to what we'll call an exotic place, or a place other than a beach area, like the Bahamas or something like that. So it's very exciting. It really is very life-changing experience for our students, and it's very exciting. It never gets old. Like Dr. Sherman and I could tell you, we have gone many times personally and professionally, and it's just as exciting every time. And we are learning. I have to say, we are learning as we go. Luckily, we do have Dean Villick here. We will, I'll tell you a little bit about how we structure the program. So it will be put into your spring tuition. Okay, so the 3 credits you get will be in your spring tuition. All right, so part of your 18 credits. And then there is 3,000 something. I don't know what it is. It's a little bit of a moving target, whether it's 3,800, 3,700, 3,900. It depends on the number of students that go. The minimum number of students that can create the program is 12, and then the maximum is 20. And we keep it that way because we really want to create an intimate group, and we do visit schools, and it's uncomfortable and very difficult for you to really learn about the schools and go into classrooms when there's too many of us. So it's a little bit different than Arts Abroad and some of the other programs at Ryder for that reason. The biggest thing that I want to say is that you need to be flexible. Okay, my biggest advice is that when you go abroad to a new country, look for that country. So if we're in Croatia, you know, we hope that you might be thinking, I wish I had a better shower, or I wish there was better public transportation, or gee, I'm uncomfortable in a socialist country, or whatever it is, you know. But I say, well, you could have stayed home to see what you know. And the joy in learning is being a part of something new and a culture, and really not just visiting it, but really hopefully getting to appreciate and value it.
I'll jump in here. So when we started off by taking our students to Spain, and we were in Spain 3 times, and each time we were there, our students learned something new. And Dr. Ginola's right. It isn't going to be the United States, so the hotels won't be the same. The streets won't be the same. You know, it's just going to be different. But that's why you're going. You want to be in a different environment. And I will never forget when we were in Spain, doing one of our school visits, and most of our students didn't speak, either they never had Spanish or their Spanish wasn't that good. And I just remember being in a place where everyone was speaking Spanish but our students, and they said, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to be different. This is what our students feel when we have students who are different in a class and they're not the majority. This is what they're feeling. And I'll just never forget that, because Dr. Kamens, who started the program with Dr. Ginola, she passed away a couple of years ago, said, yeah, that's one of the reasons we do this. It gives you feelings that you can't have when you're in your normal environment. And as teachers, that's what it's all about, because you're going to have all kinds of different children in your classes who are going to feel different from other children for many different reasons. And the only way for you to really understand that is to be in that situation yourself. And we're with you all the time. We're pretty much glued together. At the beginning, we are very glued together. We go to the baggage claim together. I mean, we are in one big group. We eat dinner together. And I remember in Spain, everyone wanted to be with us for every single meal at the very beginning. And somehow, like in the middle of the trip, some people said, could we go out at night by ourselves? And we said, okay, but everyone has to have a cell phone, an international cell phone. So we have to be able to contact you at any time. And we actually will sit in the hotel lobby until everybody's in their room safely. So that's a big part of the faculty-led tours at Ryder, that you are very much chaperoned, but we do give you freedom to go out on your own, and only when you want to and only when you're ready. Does that sound pretty much correct, Dr. Gianola?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something about being a part of Ryder, period. Being part of the Ryder that's in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. My daughter, she just graduated from Syracuse University in New York, and she was studying abroad in Italy for a full semester. So they went everywhere. I don't know how many countries. Every weekend they traveled to another country. And I want to say maybe she went to 9, 10 countries in the 4 or 5 months she was there. She said Croatia #1. She said best place she visited. So I just want to say that they went whitewater rafting, etc. So last year I was studying, last personal story, I promise. Last year we were studying, 2 years ago we were studying abroad in Italy, and I was FaceTiming my children at home. So I said, okay, I have to go because my students are knocking on the door to go to eat. And we only have breakfast together every day. And then there's about possibly two dinners, a welcome and a farewell dinner that you'll have together. And so you have tons of freedom. But like Dean Sherman said, we're always there. And when you're ready, you'll take that freedom. So my daughter said, I don't understand it. I spent 5 months in Europe. I never called my professor to go to dinner. And I said, you never went to Rider University. I said, yeah, that's how it is. So you certainly, I do want to stress that. It's an incredible trip. In just 9 or 10 days, something unbelievable happens. Even though sometimes I'm like, okay, it's the 4th or 5th day and that thing didn't happen. But boy, for some reason, by the end, it happens. It's a great experience for those of you who might be considering traveling and studying abroad more in the future. Several of our students continue to travel as we have different locations every single year, and you can continue to gain these credits. These credits are used on your check sheet for your education elective. What else can I say? Oh, this is what makes it really different. It's not like just traveling with your friends, because you feel a little bit part of the culture. We have someone from Croatia with us all the time. We will have a guide that will know personally whoever it is, and knock wood, we've always had the most wonderful people. And so you're learning every day on a personal level, and you're part of the school system, and you have a reason to get up and dress up. And it's not just looking for a beach day or what are we going to do. And so you get that feeling of that, wow, you're really doing work there. You really have a purpose and you're a part of the country. And then you have the other half where we really do have really nice excursions, history, free time. And we can show you our little presentation, but it changes. It will change as we get closer. But there will be two of those things mixed in that makes it very special.
And also, I just want to say something about the tuition. So you don't actually pay, you don't pay extra for the 3 credits, because we build it into your schedule in the spring. And we did that on purpose when we started this, so you wouldn't have to pay. You would get the college credit for the course, but you wouldn't be paying for 3 extra credits. So you just have to pay for the trip. And because so many people go, the plane fare, the hotels and all are less than they would be if you went by yourself. And the other thing is visiting the schools. I just can't say enough about what it's like to be in a classroom in another country, watching kids learn. When you walk into that classroom, you're the visitor from the United States, and you become sort of the center of attention. So even though you wanted to sit at the back of the room maybe and just watch, you're going to end up at the front of the room. And in many of our countries, our students do teach. So we still have to work that part out to see, what the school visits will be like. But that's also fun, getting up in front of a classroom. You speak English, they're learning English, and they want to hear your English as well, which is also kind of fun. And then you learn what's different about the education system. How long they go to school, what's the school year like, what subjects do they take? How long do they, for how long do they study each subject each day? You know, how many languages do they learn from 0 maybe here to 2 to 3 in Croatia? So you're going to learn a lot about what's different.
So on the list of most frequently asked questions that I get, and I'm kind of surprised that nobody asked, is about food.
Oh,
You know, like 9 days. I mean, food is very important, and the Croatian society, everything is about food. So when you look at where Croatia is located, it borders Italy. Hungary is right there. Greece and Turkey are not that far away. So the cuisine is different based on the region you're at, but it is sort of the fusion of Northern Italian. So there would be pastas with, but not with like Southern Italian heavy red sauces, more like with the truffles and the other like lighter sauces. We eat a lot of meat, and all sorts of meat, not chicken, and anything from game. It could be like wild boar, lamb. Um, Obviously, every restaurant is going to have chicken and beef, and vegetarian options. And on the coast, a lot of seafood, and all sorts of seafood. And it's usually the seafood that was caught that morning in the sea, and it just tastes different than something that may have been caught like 20 days ago and frozen twice before being on your table. A lot of people really, really enjoy food in Croatia. And the other thing is we have this coffee culture that everybody notices when they come in. And my wife, when she first time came to Croatia, and it was like on a Wednesday morning, we were in downtown Zagreb in the center city, and she looked around and she's like, "Don't people work here?" Because everybody's in cafes. And it's like, well, if you're going to have a meeting, I mean, let's talk about this, right? Do you want to be stuck inside the office building having a meeting, or do you want to meet the people in a cafe, have a nice cup of espresso, and have your meeting in a cafe outside, right? So you'll see that a lot of Croatians, and my students, I took a large group last year from RIDA, there were 34 students total. You know, some of their diaries are like, Croatians only hydrate with coffee and wine. I think that some of the other comments were like, Croatians, when they're in cafe, they're not looking at their cell phones, they're talking to each other. You do not see people carrying the water bottles in Croatia everywhere they walk to. And believe it or not, that's like a fairly new occurrence in the United States as well. Like 20 years ago, when I was in college, like 25 years ago, we did not walk around with bottles of water around. That just wasn't a thing. So there are some differences in society that are like clearly visible when you come in and just observe. But like I said, usually usually people who visit Croatia always go back.
What are you doing with the pandemic?
I'm glad you brought that up. So Croatia handled it very differently than the United States. So remember, Croatia is a tourist country. Croatia has 4 million people. Last year, 20 million visitors came from all over the world to Croatia. When the news from Wuhan first started spreading, there were about 100,000 tourists from China in Croatia at the time, right? So as a part of the country preparedness, because it depends on the tourism revenue, they started early testing. So they started testing before the first case. When the first case was identified, they did the tracing of all the contacts and asked everybody to self-isolate for 2 weeks. So Croatia being half of New Jersey in size, and in New Jersey, we've had 1,200 people who passed away, right? In Croatia, 2,400 people got infected, and 100 people passed away from COVID. And out of those 100, some of them were really, really, really sick to begin with. The difference being is in Croatia, the government decided not to politicize the situation, but to really let the chief virologist, which would be, and she actually has worked with Dr. Fauci in the past because she was here in the United States for training, to let her make decisions based on science. As a result, they were not locked up for 3 months like we have, and the number of cases has been significantly different than our experience here, especially in this part of the United States. So Croatia is open. They have not had a COVID case in weeks now. People actually have come back to normal. Children are back in school. People are back at work. People are in restaurants, in cafes, on the street. on the streets. And when you see them, they're even no longer wearing masks. There's some things that they request for. So like if you're going to walk into a restaurant, there's going to be somebody who's going to give you sanitizer and watch you sanitize your hands. Because those were the preventive measures that they've implemented and are still sticking to. But it just has been a very, very, very different experience for Croatia than it has been for us here.
Okay, so, here's our welcome, and hopefully we'll be traveling together in spring 2021. Okay, for those of you who might not know where Croatia is located, like Dean Villick said, it's close to Italy. It was once part of the Hungary Empire, lots of history. But what we know in the 20th century is that it was part of Yugoslavia, and it gained independence in 1991. Okay, so this is what will be happening there through lecture, school visit, reflection. You'll compare and contrast education in Croatia and the United States, including history, culture, practice, teacher preparation. That's really interesting to learn how the teachers there become certified and how they work, tenure, etc., and current issues. Okay. So there'll be 3 or 4 lectures. This is abroad. First, I'm going to say a little bit about being here. In the spring semester, since it is included 3 credits in your, spring courses, we will meet approximately 4 or 5 times. And in those, and typically we will look at your schedule, but honestly, we'll probably be meeting 4 or 5 times on a Friday. Okay, now that we've all learned to Zoom, who knows if we would do that. But basically, there's a few reasons for our meetings. One, we'll be learning about the culture, the government, a little history, and the school system. So from what we might gather here, we create a community, so we'll probably split you in groups, and each person actually, each group comes to the class and shares what they've learned, okay? It's also a big community building experience, so we get to know you and understand you and know your quirks, and we say, oh yeah, he or she told us about that before we went. So, this person's always the early one, so we pick the early one to get the late ones, and also it's, just a little team building before we leave. Then when we're there, this is what happens. We'll have 3 or 4 lectures on these topics: history, culture, and interesting, and the history and culture, how it has impacted education. What it means from one type of government to another type of government, and then how does that play out in schools and education. We do try to get into schools that are early childhood, secondary, etc. And what we're doing each time we have a visit or a lecture, every other day or so often, every couple of days, we'll have a structured class. And since Boris already told us that Croatians like to meet outside to do business, we'll certainly try to do that as well. So what we do is we get together and we actually keep a running Google Doc of what we learned at home. So we'll fill in like a few pieces at home, what we think, is the reality in Croatia. And then we do a little bit of comparisons, like, well, did we really get it right? Like, what's happening? What's the difference with discipline? What's the difference with, things like IEPs, et cetera? Do they have something comparable? And methods, et cetera. So we have a real nice foundation, and we have a real basis, real talking points and things to look at while we're there. We'd love to hear about what the current issues are in education and teacher prep.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I'm from Zagreb. Zagreb is the capital of Croatia. The interesting part about Zagreb is that in a country of 4 million people, 1 million people live in Zagreb. So it is the largest center. It is where the government is, where most of the cultural institutions are. The largest, obviously, number of schools based on the population. And you have everything. So in my high school, I don't know how many of you are familiar with international baccalaureate schools.
Mhm.
So IB schools are UNESCO-sponsored schools, and they have them in the United States as well, where the entire curriculum is in English and it's standardized. So when you complete IB, it's sort of like taking the AP level classes in high school. So like I said, all my physics was in English, my social anthropology was in English, everything. So in Zagreb, you will be able to see a large, vibrant city of, it's about 1,000 years old. So there are some structures that are very old. For example, my mom lives in the historic core of the city. Her building is about 300 years old. Our cathedral of the Assumption of Mary is, there's some parts are 1,000 years old. It's been remodeled, as was damaged through history, etc. But some parts are old. So you get that sort of flavor of the old architecture and style. But on the flip side of it, it is a modern center. So there's companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers that has their Croatia headquarters in Croatia. So it's sort of like this balance of like old and new and modern and vibrant. Um, Zagreb is a capital, one of the European capitals. Like I said, has all the infrastructure. What makes Zagreb different for me personally than other European capitals is that it's a chill city. And by that, I mean like there are no crowds to kind of like walk through. Their rush hour is like nothing close to like a New York rush hour that you would see. The cars are still moving at a regular speed. It's just like you get to experience in city, um, but like I said, it's not overcrowded. It's not in your face. The closest one city in the United States that I would consider like has a similar flavor is Washington D.C. And I love Washington D.C. because you have that culture, you have the monuments. Zagreb has the largest number of museums per capita in the world, and there's a museum dedicated to like everything. We have a very popular with tourists is a museum of broken relationships, where they collect artifacts after people split up to sort of denote the breakup. There's a museum of illusions, and that's something that I would highly recommend you actually go see when you're there, where they have setups where you may be in the mirror room and all of a sudden you see like 300 of you everywhere. It's like a really cool place. But then they have the high art museums, so classical arts, etc. The second place here is the Plitvice Lakes that everybody goes sees. Have you guys seen The Lord of the Rings, the trilogy? No, nobody has seen it. So in The Lord of the Rings, there's this like mystical, magical place, Rivendell, where the elves, the mystical creature, lives. And what it is everywhere where you turn around, there's these waterfalls. Well, Plitvice Lakes, usually when people who have seen the movie will say this looks just like Rivendell, because you walk around the lakes for about 2 hours and you see, I think, about 80 some waterfalls. And it's just, it's pristinely clean. The lakes, you can see through them. Even the boats across the lakes that take you from one place to another one are electric boats. And that is really to prevent any oil accidentally from a regular engine spilling into the lake. So as you're going through it, like all you see is just waterfall after waterfall after waterfall. And the largest one is an 80-yard drop of water. So like imagine looking up, seeing 80 yards up and the water just falling. So it is just like, and May is such a beautiful time to visit it because it's spring, the nature is already alive, you're in the mountains, it's gonna be warm. But because of all the snow melted from the Alps, that's when the waterfalls are like the lushest and you see the biggest sort of like bang for your buck when you're there in May. That's my favorite place to go to the lakes. Because at the end of the summer, when the heat does its tolls, the waterfalls aren't as strong necessarily as in the spring. And then the city of Dubrovnik, it is one of my favorite places in the world. It's very it's like a real fairy tale like. Now the city is old, and you can see it here on the pictures. It's a walled city. Um, it's, for example, the first city in the world that established a quarantine, and had, because it was on the trading route between China, India, and then Venice all the way in Italy. So it was a very rich city, of merchant marine, pretty much. But that really, during the Black Plague, it left them open. So about half of the city population was wiped out. So as a consequence, they created and the first world's quarantine. So anybody who came to visit the city had to go into the quarantine for 40 days. If you were alive after 40 days, then you could enter the city. And I'm talking about like the 15th century right now. That quarantine is like a nightclub these days. You get to walk on these walls on top. It's about 1.5 miles around the city core, so it doesn't take really a long time to walk. There are many steps though. And it's just a breathtaking view because you have, like I said, you have the Alps on one side, but you have all the islands around it. And I think your excursion lists Lokrum Island. It is beautiful. The nickname for the city is the City of Stone with the Heart of Art, because historically they were highly educated, and really invested a lot into the arts. So you'll see on the central square in the city, every day there's a cultural presentation of the dance that we call linjo, and the music that's indigenous to the city. There's a Franciscan monastery inside that's beautiful. Right next to the monastery is the oldest, and I think, if off the top of my head, continuously operating pharmacy in the world. So it's from 1347, I think, was when the pharmacy was open, and the pharmacy is still there. They have, so back then in the 14th century, clearly they didn't have antibiotics and the medicines, biologics that we have today. But back then, because they were merchant marine, they traveled the world and they collected medicinal herbs. So within the city, there's what's called the apothecary gardens, meaning like pharmaceutical gardens. So they really brought in medicinal herbs from around the world and grew them. And really, that's how the pharmacies made it. So like, for example, willow bark, if you cook it in water, you quite literally get aspirin, right? So before the aspirin was made, people were drinking willow water to reduce inflammation. So like from my perspective, watching all of that historically was really interesting. The other thing that you'll see in the city, and this is from the 90s when Croatia was under attack and there was a war, there's still a lot of war damage left. So you'll see in museums a part where there's a hole in the wall where a grenade fell through, or you'll see a church sprayed with bullets on the front. And it's sort of like, you know, on a human level, when you're there and you see something that's so beautiful and so old, you know, trying to consolidate how anybody could actually drop a grenade on it, it's just mind-boggling. But you know, the sea there, this is in the south of Croatia, they get snow, and when they get snow, they may get only like 1/4 inch of the snow every 25 years. So it's always warm, always, and sunny. And I always say to people, you know, if you're down there in the south of Croatia, and if it's not sunny, like you're out of luck, because it's beautiful even in the winter. Like in May, it's in Zagreb, it's going to be like May here in New Jersey, where you could actually have like a rainy day. It's a very similar climate. But by the time you go through Dubrovnik in May, Dubrovnik's probably going to be like 85, and the sea is going to be cold. It's going to be about 75 degrees. And to Croatians, like 75 degrees for water swimming, it's cold for us. But you know, like the Adriatic Ocean, if you're swimming here, that's like in the 60s at any given point in time. You know, and on the way, you'll actually see, as you're driving from Zagreb to Dubrovnik, that whole coastal part where you're driving down the coast and watching the Alps and the islands. And I'm clearly subjective, but I have never seen anything more beautiful in terms of like the natural landscape than there. It's like truly breathtaking. Oh, you're going to Split too. So that's great, because Split is the site of Roman Emperor Diocletian's retirement palace. So in the 3rd century, when he retired, he built this palace that today is the core of the city of Split. The palace is still there, and you can go through the basements. Did you guys watch the Game of Thrones? No? So there's quite a few scenes in the Game of Thrones that were filmed either in Dubrovnik or in Split, where you'll get to tour the basements of his palace. You'll get to tour the Temple of Jupiter, because that was sort of considered a church or the holiest place within the palace. And it is beautiful. The interesting stories is the Diocletian was noted for brutal prosecutions and persecutions of Christians. He quite literally, as a Roman emperor, whenever there were Christians, he had them killed. So we have this thing in Croatia that we call the Croatian spite. And it's kind of difficult to explain, but so an example of it is within the Temple of Jupiter, and you see the monument to Jupiter within the temple. Croatians centuries ago decided to put a baptismal font. By and large, I want to say 95% of Croatians consider themselves Roman Catholics. So within the Temple of Jupiter, there's a baptismal font, which is this hand-carved stone large piece where thousands upon thousands upon thousands of babies were Christian. So that was just sort of to spite Diocletian, given his acts against Christians. The city of Split is a crazy city. It's just in Croatia, depending on which city you come from, your personality may be a little bit different, kind of like if you come from Atlanta versus New York here, right? And even though Croatia is so small, those differences are still pronounced. I think the city of Split has the largest number of Olympic medals per capita in the world. Just within that one city that has about 300,000 people, I think currently they sit at about 120 Olympic medals. I don't know if you guys watched The Last Dance, the documentary that just came out about Michael Jordan. So Tony Kukoc, one of the players on Chicago Bulls, is from Split. But I mean, the list of athletes is just crazy. And that's another thing, when in Croatia, like Croatia is so sports crazy, that we're currently the vice champions of the world in soccer. We have been over the last 5 years world champions in tennis, world champions in water polo, gold medalists in team handball, karate, judo. It permeates every aspect of Croatian life, is either rooting for sports or playing sports. And like I said, it's the time to be in Croatia was during the World Cup, because since Croatia did so well, like everybody was on the streets, singing, hanging out, just partying into the night.
Basically, we have hotels and obviously a safe part of the town because the town is safe. We don't have any of this nailed down yet. The airfare will be included, breakfast will be included each day, some meals, and we look for hotels with wireless internet access. You want to go to the next one?
And I would say, just so you know, you're going in May, which is not the height of the season, because the height of the season starts in June 15th. So more than likely, you'll end up in really nice hotels. Like my group, when I took the students, we were in 4- and 5-star hotels.
Okay, well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And the next slide is a picture of Dr. Gianola and I when we didn't have to socially distance. So that's sort of a treat.